Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome and welcome back to the channel. I'm Elle and this is Elle's Reptiles. This week we are doing a video that I've done several videos very similar to this in the past, but never one quite like this one. Today, we are going to be talking about the most popularly kept pets in the reptile hobby. This is not necessarily a why you should get these animals sort of list. This is actually going to be looking at the pros of the animals and then diving into the cons of each individual animal, just to help make you make the best possible decision for yourself and your life situation. Disclaimer, I'm not talking bad about any of these animals. I have every single one of these animals on this list. I love them all, but they are often kind of sold off as this is the most easy pet in the entirety of the world, and that isn't always necessarily the case. So we're just going to talk about why they aren't sometimes. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Leopard Gecko, so make sure to stay until the end of the video to find out all about this awesome company. Let's get started. So the most kept animal, in my opinion, the one that you always see people get as new keepers, the one that I very first got, is the bearded dragon. Now, the bearded dragon is popular for a lot of very good reasons. They are very easy to find. Anywhere and everywhere pets are sold, you can get a bearded dragon. They are pretty hardy animals, especially if you get an adult. They are very hardy. You have, for lack of better terms, customization options. I didn't like that. You have multiple color options to get whatever color suits your fancy. You have multiple color options to get whatever color you want. They are fantastic being handled, even most of the time as babies. And then as they age into adults, they just kind of lounge around. Their temperament's fantastic, 10 out of 10. On to the cons of these animals. The first and biggest one that a lot of people unfortunately don't talk about when they are looking to sell these animals is that the actual setup for them can be very pricey. And not it can be, it is very pricey. These guys are going to need a pretty large tank as they get older. Bare minimum, you are wanting to look at a 4-foot by 2-foot tank. The bigger the tank, the more expensive the tank. And the lights for these guys are also very expensive. So you have a 4-foot tank and you want at least 3/4 of that tank to be covered with a linear UVB light. Those are expensive lights. I am in the process of getting Zaz a new one because it's time. Haven't had any luck with that. My order has broken twice. But that light was like $30 something, and depending on the brand, you need to replace them every 6 months to a year. The hood itself, you're looking at upwards of $100. And then of course you need heat bulbs, and to redo those when they go out, the fixture for the heat bulbs, you need some sort of bottom flooring for the animal, substrate or something at the bottom. You need enrichment for them, you need climbing areas, you need hides for them. You are going to need to feed them. They eat bugs and salad every day. Depending on where you are, you'll either need to buy bottled water or ReptiSafe for the water for them. There's a lot of things that go into it. Depending on where you get this bearded dragon, you also may have to deworm the bearded dragon. Doing this, you can do it in one of two ways. If you know what you're doing, you can go to beardeddragon.co and get dewormer for bearded dragons, or you will need to go to a vet and have them test and prescribe that medicine. Either way, that is more money that people don't talk about when you get that bearded dragon. The proper environment and lighting has to be maintained for that bearded dragon at all times, or else it could cause issues. Yes, they are hardy animals. Yes, they can deal with a lot of bad situations, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't negatively affect them forever. So if you don't maintain those proper UVB levels in that tank and give them the appropriate supplements, it could lead to metabolic bone disease, which is something that you're going to take to the vet to get treated. If you don't give a female adult bearded dragon a dig box, it could lead to egg binding. If you are not cleaning up the waste of that animal at all times, don't leave bearded dragon waste sitting around. If you're not cleaning that up, it could lead to parasites or fungal infections. You gotta stay on top of the hygiene, you gotta stay on top of the conditions in that tank in order to make sure that your bearded dragon is as healthy as they can be. Ball pythons. Ball pythons are another one that everyone loves, but ball pythons can be a little finicky. So before we get to that, let's go to the pros. They are very easy to find. They can be very inexpensive if you go with just a normal morph, or you can get fancy, and there are thousands upon thousands of different morphs out there that you can choose from. You can get all different colors and patterns and all that jazz. Their temperaments are absolutely amazing. Every now and then there will be a hissy or more attitude prone ball python, but that's usually a very quick fix. Usually with just some handling down, they are going to be good to go. But the negatives that someone might not talk about that is trying to sell you a ball python, getting them to eat can be difficult. They are very, very, very finicky eaters. This is the biggest one to me. The biggest con to ball pythons is that they can be very finicky eaters. It is not uncommon at all for your ball python to go a month without eating. They just do sometimes. Sterling Starling has eaten the last few months normally, but before that he went a good 4 or 5 months without eating. Didn't lose any weight, he was good to go, he was active, he wanted to be out and handled and all of that. He just did not want to eat for several months at a time, and that gets very stressful very quickly. But it is just kind of part of having a ball python. This being a normal behavior is of course also dependent on like you making sure that the temperatures are right and the humidity is right and that they're not stressed out, they don't have any other underlying conditions. But as long as all that's normal, they're acting normal, then most likely it's just them being ball pythons. The other big con with ball pythons, which isn't really a con unless you are super brand new to getting into ball pythons. A lot of people will see that ball pythons are being kept in tubs by breeders, and they will try to keep their ball python in a little bitty tub. These animals do need space to move around. If they are a male or they are a baby, they are going to love climbing room. Some females are kind of iffy about that just because they are heavier and don't want to climb. They need enrichment, they need hides. These guys should not be kept in tiny little breeder tubs. Those are the two biggest cons that I have for these guys, but they are very important and are super important to know if you are just now getting a ball python. Next up, we have corn snakes. Corn snakes, just like ball pythons, are a very popular choice for new reptile keepers. Corn snakes, I think, are one of the best possible snakes for new reptile keepers in terms of just their easiness. They are super fantastic eaters. They have amazing temperaments. They are going to be very active when you are handling them. So if you're looking for a more active snake, these are the guys. They also come in a lot of different morphs, but a couple of cons with these guys that you may not know if you're just now getting a corn snake. They are escape artists. With a corn snake, you need to make sure that every inch of that tank is escape proof. If their noses can fit through anything in that tank, their whole body can fit through it. They will escape. I have had my corn snake escape twice, and that was with a screen lid on the top. Make sure that if you are getting a corn snake, you have everything sealed away so that they can't get out. This also goes for if you are handling them. Corn snakes can be very fast and they are very thin and pretty light. So if you have them out and about, make sure that you are paying attention to them at all times, or again, they're going to escape. That's really the only con that I have for corn snakes. It's a pretty big one if you don't know that it's an issue, but corn snakes are all around one of the absolute best beginner snakes that you could possibly get. Crested geckos. If you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know that crested geckos are my all-time favorite lizard. They're another one that are pretty easy to find. They're not going to be as easy to find as a bearded dragon, but they are pretty easy to find. They also come in multiple color patterns and morphs. They don't require a huge amount of space, but these guys do come with a few cons. Number one, they need a pretty high humidity all the time. These guys come from the rainforest of New Caledonia, which are wet areas. They need it to be pretty humid, but they also need ventilation. You can't have your crested gecko sitting in just wet, stale environments because it could make them sick, but they need ventilation and they need high humidity. Another potential con for these guys is this is not going to be a pet that you're just going to have out and playing games or whatever. This is a pet that you have out and you pay attention to because they are very jumpy, especially as babies. They can be pretty crazy and they can climb walls. So if your crested gecko gets out and it decides to scale a wall, it's going to take a little bit of effort to get that crested gecko back. Out of all the animals that people have messaged me about that they have had escape, crested geckos comes up number one on that list of people messaging me like, my crested gecko got out, how do I get it back? They're number one on that list. And another con for crested geckos, which isn't really a con, it's their natural behavior, is that crested geckos can lose their tails with any kind of rough handling, or they can just get scared and drop their tails. Just keep in mind that their tails do not grow back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And these guys are nocturnal, so unless you are up at night, you're not going to see these guys. These guys hide 100% in the daytime and only come out at night. So if you're wanting something that's going to be active in the daytime, maybe this isn't the lizard for you. And the last huge con for those crested geckos are that handling them down as little babies is going to be a little bit more difficult. They're little babies, they're scared, they're fast, they jump high. How I dealt with this is I just left her alone. I just made sure that I was putting my hand in the tank every day, left my hand in the tank for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. I just didn't force it to happen and it just happened. But if you are going to try to get them to be handled down quicker because you don't want to wait, then just know that they're going to run and leap and be very difficult. And the last one on this list is the leopard gecko. Of course, leopard gecko is going to be one of the most kept pet reptiles. They have adorable personalities. They are super, super sweet. Handling them when they are comfortable with handling is super easy. They are pretty slow moving. They can be fast if they get scared, but they are pretty slow moving. They are super fun to watch hunt and look for things, and they don't require a crazy amount of space. So it is not shocking at all that they are on every list for best beginner reptiles. But they do have some cons, just like all reptiles are going to have cons. Just like with crested geckos, as babies, these guys are going to be difficult to handle down. They are tiny, tiny little babies, and we are giants to them. So handling down a leopard gecko is going to be a little bit of a task. I did this the same way I did my crested geckos. I just left them alone. I just left them alone until they were ready to come out to me. Handling them down as babies is definitely possible if you are willing to put in that extra effort and put in the time with them. Just know that it will probably be met with them barking at you and or peeing on you. That is perfectly normal when they are stressed out and you are trying to handle them. Another huge con for leopard geckos is that these guys are crepuscular, which means that they are going to be happier if you give them UVB light. When you first get a leopard gecko, usually UVB light is not mentioned because for a long time, they were thought to be nocturnal, which meant that they didn't need UVB light. This is not a situation like a bearded dragon where you're going to need a giant UVB light, but a small light for them, or the Arcadia Shade Dweller, which is gonna last a year. I think that one lasts a year. It's going to benefit them quite a lot. On top of just handling leopard geckos down, these guys are also going to need at least 3 hides in their tanks. They're going to need a warm hide, a cool hide, and a humid hide. That humid hide is very important. Needing at least 3 hides is just on the cons list just because they are already in a smaller space, and so having to also have 3 hides, including a humid hide, kind of can lower your possibilities of designing that tank, or they can make you be more creative. Who knows? And digging areas for these guys is pretty important. Leopard geckos love to dig. So a lot of people, me included, keep leopard geckos on tile. One of my leopard geckos on tile and the other is fully bioactive. Even if you keep your leopard gecko on tile, I highly, highly suggest having a digging area for them because leopard geckos love to dig. And if you have a female, just like with bearded dragons, you're going to need a dig box for them to lay eggs in. That's just on the cons list because, again, that's one more thing that needs to go in that tank. And the last con of these guys is that sometimes it is a little difficult for them to shed their extremities. So leopard geckos have these very long and weird looking toes, and shed gets stuck to those very easily. That is the reason that you have to have that humid hide in there. But sometimes even with that, it can be a little difficult for them to get that shed off, and that then means that you need to give them baths and stuff to try to get them off, because since their toes are so long and stringy, for lack of a better word, the shed will get stuck around them, then they can lose toes. So that's a huge thing to watch out for. Just make sure when your leopard gecko is shedding, you are paying attention to that shed. But that is all that I have for this week's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was different than just a normal best pet reptiles for beginners, because that's not necessarily what this list was. And again, no negativity towards any of these animals. I love all of them. As I said at the beginning of this video, this week's video is sponsored by I Heart Geckos. I Heart Geckos is such a fantastic company that we have had as a sponsor on this channel for a couple of years now. Love this company. They make conversion kits for gecko tanks, so you can turn any gecko tank, like crested geckos, you can turn their tank into a front opening tank very inexpensively. Conversion kits have lots of ventilation, so you don't have to worry about stagnant air in those tanks. Reptiles prefer you to reach directly in at them as opposed to from the top. These conversion kits make that a possibility. If you happen to order one of these kits, make sure to leave Elle's Reptiles in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so that way they know that you guys are coming from here. Thank you so much to I Heart Geckos for sponsoring these videos. As always, if you haven't already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials, like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I have a new video, which is every Sunday and some Wednesdays. This week's Instagram shout out is for Jazz Taisha for following me on Instagram and going through and liking a whole bunch of my stuff. And this week's subscriber shout out is for Vida Mana for commenting on last week's video. Thank you guys both so much for the follows and subscribes and comments and likes and all of that jazz. You are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. Fluff, 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 fluff. I'm Elle, and this is Elle's Reptiles. Lit. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. I forgot to put this at the beginning. before we get started this video. This, of course, can be chalked up to this being a normal activity, this being a normal behavior